Good evening to you, wherever you are watching us from across the Eastern Africa region. Welcome to the Point of News tonight. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole.
My name is John Allen Namu. Lots in store for you in this bulletin. We are kicking up that discussion on the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Of course, Yvonne Okwara, Checkpoint's all about that this evening.
Yes, we're all celebrating the coming of Obama, saying how it'll be good tidings for the country. But what exactly does that mean? What do we need to tap into? What do our negotiations need to be about? Because we very well could end up with him leaving and, leaving smoke and mirrors behind. So it's very important that we get it right. We'll be taking a look at entrepreneurship, young people accessing financing. What are they going to be doing when they're meeting and talking to the bigwigs like Richard Branson and the Sharks? Will they get lost in the water, get eaten up? So we have an eclectic panel lined up for you on Checkpoint. So please do keep your comments coming in as to what your hopes are for this Global Entrepreneurship Summit coming up this week. So just stay with us for that and more.
Of course, there's lots more on KTN Weekend Prime, including drama unfolding in a church in Embu. Stay tuned for that. These are now the highlights on KTN Weekend Prime.
A Sunday speech that is next Sunday is penciled in.
It's a Kasarani date for Obama next weekend. And Kogelo spruces up for Obama. Plus, Nairobi is set for a major cancer conference. And prayers and praise set aside as church factions row in Embu over funds. U.S. President Barack Obama will make a speech at the Safaricom Stadium, Kasarani, during his visit to the country later in the week. State House has confirmed that Obama is slated to make the speech at the stadium arena on Sunday, the 26th of July.
Obama will on Saturday co-host the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Gigiri and hold bilateral talks with President Uhuru Kenyatta. KTN's Rita Tinina reports on Kenya's big moment and the huge prospects of hosting one of the biggest summits in the world.
Recent weeks have seen efforts to give Nairobi a facelift. Clearly, not your ordinary city beautification. Kenya is not only gearing up for the first ever visit by a sitting United States president, it will host one of the biggest conferences, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. U.S. President Barack Obama's itinerary in Kenya has remained closely guarded, but it is now slowly taking shape.
Next Saturday, President Kenyatta and President Obama will co-host the Global Entrepreneurship Summit at the UN compound in Gigiri. And later, they will hold bilateral talks at State House, Nairobi. Those talks, as many of you are aware, will be followed by a joint news conference at the iconic site.
President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to give details of Kenya's agenda at the bilateral talks with Obama during a news conference slated for Tuesday. Aside from the Global Entrepreneurship Summit and bilateral talks, Obama will be making a speech at the Safaricom Stadium, Kasarani.
The U.S. Embassy has confirmed that this is in fact the case, and a Sunday speech that is next Sunday is penciled in.
The exact time for the Sunday speech or who will be allowed into the 60,000-seater stadium for the event remain unclear. What is clear, though, is that Kenya will play host to thousands of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and high-level government officials during the 6th Global Entrepreneurship Summit.
And on the agenda will be possibility. So it is only fitting.
For Kenya, a chance to cash in on business opportunities from accommodation, transport to communication services, something that may give a shot in the arm to the ailing tourism sector.
For him to come to this destination, being the world's most powerful, the leader of the world's most powerful nation, is a very, very positive endorsement of Kenya as a destination. And this is what we are looking at in terms of leveraging on his visit now and in the future.
But despite the good prospects, the summit may provide a logistical nightmare and test the country's capacity to host global conferences. Kenya is the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to host the summit, now in its 6th year, and which has previously been hosted by the United States, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia and Morocco. Rita Tinina, KTN News.
Yeah, and so now we want to focus on what this summit is indeed all about, and most importantly, why Kenya.
So it's not about the beast, just to be clear.
To be clear. Of course, the people of Kogelo are not too happy, but he's here on official function. It's not about the beast, it's not about the 19 security dogs that I hear are coming in. But let's get to some of those details now. It's the 6th Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Now, it has been organized annually every year, of course, since the year 2009, and it was made official during that historic speech in Cairo by Obama, at which point he elevated entrepreneurship to the fore of the U.S. engagement with the world. Now, the first one was held the following year in Washington, D.C., and every year since then in Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, in Malaysia, Morocco, and now the 6th one here in Kenya. So what is this about? Basically, it's just about entrepreneurs, business people, venture capitalists, foundations, and world business leaders as well to come in, network, take a look at what is there. Basically, this is where you want to find your angel investor, if you like. Now, how did it come to Kenya? Well, the discussion began last year at the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, and the aim of that was to highlight America's commitment to Africa in terms of security, democratic development, and its people. The theme of that Leaders Summit was investing in the next generation, and it was here that the President of the United States promised that the next summit would be held in sub-Saharan Africa. So the big question, of course, we ask ourselves is, why Kenya? So put together a couple of statistics here that should tell you why Kenya is the economic powerhouse and why this was the perfect location for this summit on entrepreneurship. First of all, of course, is that Kenya has been ranked as the 3rd fastest growing economy out of the top 20 economies, top 20 fastest growing economies, I should say. And this is from a survey, excuse that typo there, by Bloomberg Business. They talked to economists, and that is what they came up with. And it's important to note that Kenya and Nigeria are the only African countries on that list. Now, this may sound rosy, so let's put in a little bit of a rider here that all of these great optimistic statements are made, even though Kenya is still grappling with a high rate of unemployment, high levels of poverty. Remember, over 40% of Kenyans live below the poverty line. Now, another thing that would attract the GE Summit to the country is the advanced human capital, with an adult literacy at 87%, and that is the highest in the East African region. And it would probably be due to the fact that Kenya has the highest public expenditure in education at 17.7% across the Eastern African nations. We also have a strong private sector, buoyed by relatively friendly market policies. But this one here is an important one. Kenya being the Silicon Savannah. Of course, you have the Konza Techno City project that's expected to attract tech companies. All of these companies you see here, IBM, Intel, GE, Google, Microsoft, are present in Kenya and have their regional headquarters here. Another important thing to note again is the relative political stability of Kenya, and this is even though we have had the post-election violence of 2007-2008, and I might add the Likoni clashes, the Molo clashes. We have had some of politically instigated violence based on tribal lines, but if you compare that with the region, countries like Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda, Kenya is considered to be relatively stable politically, and that of course creates a great environment for foreign direct investment. Also, taking a look at some other statistics comparing Kenya and the region, our GDP accounts for 40% of the region's GDP, followed closely by Tanzania at 28%, Uganda at 21%, Rwanda at 8%, and Burundi at 3%. Here's another one. Kenya's economy being resilient. If you remember, after the 2007-2008 post-election violence, our economy was literally at 0%. Of course, a number of years later, we're now at around about 6%. Another big one is the reopening of Westgate Mall that proves to the world that we are indeed able to bounce back. Now, here's another thing that I think Obama and Uhuru Kenyatta, two presidents who are co-hosting this summit, have in common. Of course, President Obama talking about entrepreneurship and using that as a way to engage with the world. But you will remember President Uhuru Kenyatta has on several occasions talked about entrepreneurship as a way of getting out of employment. And if we can move to the next one, there is where we talk about these funds that have been set aside for young people, women, Uwezo Fund's Youth Enterprise Development Fund and the Women Enterprise Fund. You remember after the last general election, the 6 billion shillings that was meant for a runoff, the president promised to channel that into the Uwezo funds. This is a figure that you want to take a look at. 10 billion shillings has been allocated to these three funds over the last 5 years. Now, that is a huge amount of money. Of course, there's the issues of uptake and whether the youth and women have the skills to be able to take up these funds and utilize them and use them effectively. Now, all of these things paint a really rosy picture, right? Let's remember that we have challenges of unemployment, insecurity, lacking skill set amongst the young people, and the big one, which is corruption. So, the question we will be asking today on Checkpoint is, how do we harness the best out of this summit? How are we negotiating these deals? And of course, how are we making sure that we get rid of corruption? We'll talk about how, corruption is now in the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
But you can imagine this young person who doesn't even have capital to begin with can barely afford corruption.
Be corrupt. Yeah.
Absolutely. So our panel tonight, very interesting. We have Anzetsa, who's a development economist and a columnist with the Business Daily. We also have Sam Gishur, an entrepreneur and the founder of NILAB. And we have Professor Joseph Kea, he's a public policy analyst at Kipra. So we'll be taking a look at all of these questions, and your views as well are welcome. The hashtag we're using tonight is Checkpoint. 22155 is the SMS number as well.
All right, and that definitely kicks off our coverage of the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, beg your pardon, this week with that big discussion on Checkpoint. But we still are covering other issues around the Entrepreneurship Summit and that Obama visit, and a little Kenyan village that was thrust into the limelight when Obama became US president has received a facelift of a lifetime. Indeed, Kogelo clings to every hope that Obama will visit, despite what was said yesterday, visit his father's home, and despite that official confirmation to the contrary.
Residents of Barack Obama's ancestral village had hoped the US president would pass by them during his first visit to Kenya since he took office. But although he won't be able to make it this time, the villagers of Kogelo still view the Obama family with a sense of pride.
Those in Obama's ancestral village of Kogelo thank the US president for recent changes largely paid for by outside donors and the Kenyan government. National Grid electricity reached Kogelo for the first time hours after Obama won election in 2008. A paved road and piped water followed soon after.
When he has become the president, that's when we got the tarmac road, good water for drinking. This school got an ECD classroom, 2 classrooms, an office, and a store.
Obama is a source of pride and profit for many. But for the Kenyan Obamas, he is a family member first.
I'll greet him and he'll greet me in the language he knows. He'll ask me, "How are you, Granny?" And I'll tell him I'm fine.
In the family compound in Kogelo sit the newly refurbished graves of Sarah's husband and son, Barack Hussein Obama Sr. Though Obama has confirmed he won't be visiting the village during his trip to Kenya, those in Kogelo hope he will continue to inspire them.
What he has, proved to many Kenyans that despite your humble backgrounds, you can rise from, your humble backgrounds to become one of the most powerful people in the world.
In the lead up to the US president's visit, both Americans and Kenyans are united in this fascination at Obama's paternal heritage, reaching from a tiny African village to the White House in one single generation.
Let's move away from that summit to another upcoming conference where 30 First Ladies from African countries have landed in Nairobi ahead of tomorrow's conference that seeks to stop cervical, breast and prostate cancer in Africa. The conference, which will be hosted by Kenya's First Lady Margaret Kenyatta, will also feature free cancer screening to members of the public at the KICC here in Nairobi. On Sunday, hundreds of men and women turned up to register for the free screening. The conference, which is the 9th of its kind, will seek ways to merge public and private partnerships in the fight against cancer in Africa.
What's going on in this house?
If you can take that one.
And you're taking this cancer before it.
When you walk around Nairobi or any other place, you see big notice boards, advertisements saying, we cure cancer, we cure diabetes, we cure this. And then my take is, I think we need other ministries as well who are responsible for checking these kind of institutions to also help the health ministry and see what we can do with these people, because they are misleading our patients. A lot of patients who come to our hospitals, you find that they are already at late stage. Not because, they got to know about their cancers late, but they were advised, misinformed.
Leaders in Mombasa are now calling on the president to order a crackdown on drug abuse in the coastal region. The leaders say the operation against illicit brews in central Kenya yielded some fruit, and a similar one would save young people whose lives are being destroyed by drugs at the coast. KTN's John Juma reports.
Speaking during the Eid Baraza celebrations in Mombasa, a section of religious and political leaders led by Chief Kadhi and Mombasa Governor Hassan Joho urged the national government to order an operation against drug abuse in the county.
We have a president who is nothing short of being self-centered. When you tell us about fighting crime in the name of fighting liquor in Central Province, because right now the growth rate of population in Central Province is the lowest in the whole country. We here are a people that are dying out of drug and drug abuse.
Nguvu ambaye serikali kuu imeonyesha Central Kenya, tunataka tuione hapa Mombasa ikipigana na mihadarati.
Mombasa politics took center stage, with a section of leaders taking a swipe on Mombasa Senator Hassan Omar over what appears to be the latest discontent between him and Mombasa Governor.
Ndugu yangu governor, ulipokuwa huko kulikuwa na vidikidiki vingi sana vya rukaruka barabarani. Vya rukaruka. Simba nkamsituni ya wangoja hawengi, warukaruka barabarani.
Usitafute kumzinza Hassan Omari akakosa paka hicho kiti cha Senate kwa sababu ya wewe wamdanganya.
Last week in Mombasa, when Senator Hassan Omar hosted CORD leader Raila Odinga during Iftar, he did put Mombasa County on the spot over allegations of corruption based on a report by the Office of the Auditor General.
Huwezi ukaniambia leo kuna ripoti inasema 496 million hazijakuwa banked. Nataka ni tupate majibu kwa kila audit query. Tusipopata majibu katika kila audit query, na wapa ahadi yangu kama senator wa Mombasa, mutanita mbaya.
But Hassan Omar is not the only critique of the Joho-led government. Nyali MP Awiti Bolo, who declared his intention to vie for Mombasa governorship, has always criticized Hassan Joho leadership style.
Tunamwambia governor wetu, tulimchagua kuwa Mombasa governor, not tourism. Kutembea reja. Mara Italy, mara France, Dubai. Siku hizi anaomba huko na watu wanakufa hapa na njaa. Akome.
But the Mombasa governor chose not to respond to his critiques, saying there will be a right venue and the right time.
Siku hiyo ndo utajua maharagwe mboga ama chips mviazi. Kwa leo utazungumza yale ya umoja, tupendane, tusameheane.
Instead, Joho put emphasis on the need to enhance security in the county, calling upon the police officers to crack down on gangs and youths who've been killing and terrorizing residents in Mombasa.
Sitaki kusikia masikani yetu magwendes, crazy boys, sijui nini, hiyo yote lazima ifungwe, iondolewe, watoto wakae majumbani kwao.
Vijana miaka 16, miaka 15, miaka 14 can take away someone's life without even thinking twice.
Tunasema kwamba Uislamu ni dini ya amani, ndio tunajua na kila mtu anajua.
Lakini sisi kama Waislamu tumefanya nini kusaidia serikali?
On the perennial controversy over the sighting of the moon during the start or end of the holy month of Ramadan, the Chief Kadhi urged legislators to put a legislation that will allow only the Chief Kadhi to make an announcement of the moon sighting.
Nchi yetu ya jirani Zanzibar wanayo kanuni na sheria kama hiyo, ambapo hakuna mtu anathubutu kutangaza mwezi wa Ramadhani kuingia na kutoka isipokuwa tu kadhi mkuu ama mufti mkuu wa Zanzibar. Kwa nini na Kenya tusiige? Na ni kitu kinawezekana, ni kupitishwa tu. Watu wa propose, wa lobby, Waislamu lazima wa lobby jambo kama hili liandikwe. Hatutaki power za kufunga mtu wala kutandika mtu mijeledi. Tunataka tu katika sheria ambayo itadhibiti mwenendo wetu.
John Juma, KTN News, Mombasa.
Let's go to a story we've been following for some time now, and the African Union Commission is worried that should Burundi's unrest break into an open conflict, it would ruin over 10 years of peace that the East African country has enjoyed. Speaking to KTN's Joy Doreen Bira on the sidelines of the Financing for Development Conference in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the AU Commission Chair Dlamini Zuma stressed that EAC countries need to ensure the situation in Burundi is dealt with amicably.
Let's talk about the situation in Burundi at the moment. It appears that that country right now is grappling with President Pierre Nkurunziza's third-term bid. In this case, how far are the talks? And knowing that there is a humanitarian crisis, how would you advise that the country deals with the situation?
Well, the agreement was that the East African community is the one that's dealing with the matter directly, as it is in their courtyard in a way. So they've had several summits. The last one was last week. And they decided that President Museveni should lead some talks amongst the Burundian parties, including, of course, the president and his party and others, to find an amicable way of dealing with the Burundian situation. And of course we are hoping that he can succeed, but our main worry is that we are very worried because Burundi has enjoyed 10 years of stability and peace, and it would be a sad day and a real tragedy if Burundi slides back into an open conflict.
Drama unfolded at a church in Embu when two factions of the same church engaged in violent exchanges. The factions are said to have clashed over some money meant for the renovation of the church. One faction locked itself in the church for worship, with the other forcefully trying to gain entry. Take a look.
Inside the East African Pentecostal Church in Embu, a worship session depicts a usual church service. Welcome to a life-changing center, the church's tagline reads, but on this morning, not all are welcome. Right outside the gate, a group of people said to include pastors of 65 churches and worshippers in the region are being held up from the church. The group says the church's pastor was illegitimately conducting the service.
Yule pastor ambaye ni wa hii kanisa la EAPC Embu Town Church ambaye alipatiwa barua ya dismissal na akafutwa, astahili kuwa ni mchungaji. Kwa sasa tunamtambua kama mkola kwa sababu yeye astahili kuwa hapa kanisani. Ameweka askari hapa na wakatufungia, wanatuzuia kuingia.
Tulienda kwa kesi na tukaambiwa kanisa ni letu, na sasa anakatalia hapa kwa kanisa, na tuliomba askari na tukakataliwa wa askari. Sasa huyu ndiye amepewa askari, tunaona kama kuna mapendeleo fulani.
But they would not be held off for too long. The situation quickly turned violent. The group also alleges that the pastor refused to release some 500,000 shillings for renovations in the church.
sisi hatuoni pahali ya kwenda kanisa. Watu wa town ni lazima waende na kwegoli. Jumapili ni fair. Tunalipa 50. Na tunalipa 50 kwa kuja kwa kanisa. Na hii ni haki yetu, na hii si ya mtu. Hii ni ya kanisa, na si ya mtu. Na si ya mtu binafsi. Atoke, atafute kanisa yake binafsi.
Violent, the group would take the church by force, some sustaining injuries in the heated exchange. Police officers had to come in to calm the situation. Sharma Mani, KTN News.
All right, so let's remind you of what's coming up on Checkpoint. The hashtag is on your screen, it's Checkpoint. You can also SMS us on 22155. We're talking about the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, and we're trying to unpack that and see what's in store for you. And if you're an entrepreneur, what do you need to get right?
Eclectic panel coming up with Yvonne Okwara right after the break. Of course, lots of questions. My one question, the one I want asked, is whether this is the new buzzword. I think I posted it on Twitter. Whether this is the new buzzword replacing aid with entrepreneurship, but really pitting us against people who we have no chance of being able to compete with or cooperate with as entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Whether we're getting into slanted relationships.
Yes, and there you go. It's a very easy, fancy word to throw around. What does it really mean, and what does this summit really mean for entrepreneurs here? So please do stay tuned. Our panel tonight, Anzetse Were, we have Sam Gishuru and Professor Joseph Kea, and they're all set, as you can see, ready for the discussion. Join us after the break. Obama's coming to town and is coming with some goodies for entrepreneurs and Kenya and hopefully the region in general. But are we prepared for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit? That is the question tonight on Checkpoint. At Yvonne Okwara, at John Allen Namu, and at KTN News KE. Please do get in touch with us on SMS as well, 22155. The hashtag we're using tonight is Checkpoint. My panel, once again tonight, Sam Gishuru, who's the CEO and co-founder at NILA. Thank you. Professor Joseph Kea, who's a senior public policy analyst at Kipra. And Anzetse Were, who's a development economist. And both of them columnists at the Business Daily. So it's all about entrepreneurship, and that's why the president is coming. But talk to us, Sam, about why entrepreneurship is so important at this point in time. President Uhuru Kenyatta passionate about it, and so is President Barack Obama. What for you is entrepreneurship the silver bullet in terms of solving our problems with unemployment and poverty?
Well, I think you just mentioned it. The first thing is unemployment. We need to create jobs, and entrepreneurship is one of the best vehicles to create jobs. I mean, look at a company like Google. I mean, Google has got over 10,000 employees, I believe, at this particular point. I mean, one company, that number of employees. So you realize that, of course, entrepreneurship also right now is being driven by innovation, coming up with new solutions. So entrepreneurship is not just about jobs, it's also about solving our problems. I keep on saying this, we have so many problems, provide so many opportunities for entrepreneurs, which of course now translates to the jobs. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for us as young people especially.
Okay, and you will be speaking at the GE Summit, and we'll get to that in a moment as to what you will be saying and what your advice is to entrepreneurs. But Prof, this is not just about entrepreneurs. So imagine somebody like myself who's not an entrepreneur. I'm gainfully employed, I'd like to think, and for millions of other Kenyans, and we're thinking, so we're focusing on entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, but does this visit and does this summit, can we use it to bolster our economy in other ways? In other words, if I'm not an entrepreneur, would I benefit from Obama's coming?
Absolutely, yes. I think I want to concur what Sam has rightly stated. One of the reasons why I think Obama is here is that I think for him is a cultural phenomenon that very much identified with the U.S. For many years, entrepreneurship in the U.S. has really inaugurated the economy for centuries. You have people like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Ford, all these people who have really played a very critical role in terms of trying to solve the American problems. For President Obama, I think it's more of trying to really spread these gospel of entrepreneurship that I can be able to really assist in developing. In terms of the question you have rightly asked, in terms of the nexus between innovation, growth, and solving unemployment, is that, and I think some would agree with me, entrepreneurship are driven by the need of solving a problem. In the process, they innovate. Innovation implies reduction of cost of doing business. Reducing cost of doing business increases or enhances competitiveness. That attracts investment, and consequently we grow. And the recommended remedy for solving unemployment is economic growth.
Okay, all right, economic growth and entrepreneurship. And that's it, though, we're dealing with a world superpower. And oftentimes, people will say, well, we're getting the short end of the stick, or we can, if we're, you know, obviously even the balance of trade is highly skewed in their favor, not ours. So what do we need to be wary of, even as we go forward with this summit?
I think there are a couple of things we need to be aware of. First of all, entrepreneurship is not the solution to Africa's problems. It's not the only solution. I think it is a piece in the puzzle that's very important, but I think we can't forget things like building the skills of our young people so that they're employable, so that they can innovate, and so that they can have the skill sets that drives the economy forward. Entrepreneurship sits on a foundation of skills, and that skills has to be solid in order for that entrepreneurship to take off and lead to that economic growth. That's one thing. I think the other thing we need to be aware of is that we're dealing with a very different U.S. Pre-2008, everybody was very confident in the U.S. economy and its prospects, etc. But we're coming through a new U.S. that has really been shaken in terms of their financial and economic confidence. The world has been shaken, and I think the U.S., the Americans themselves, are still in the process of recovering economically. So we need to understand that they will come with a perspective where they're more aggressively trying to meet their interests and meet their goals. They're viewing Kenya as a destination to invest, through which they can make profits that would drive economic growth in the U.S. So I don't think we should have this naivete that they're coming with this altruistic, you know, agenda, and that, you know, we're going to get what we want. I think we need to understand that they do have their interests. They want to protect those interests. They want to bolster their economic growth. And as Kenyans, we need to think strategically in terms of the sort of capital we're going to be getting. We need to be looking for long-term patient capital. We should avoid hot money. And we should really try to get guys to anchor in and invest in the long-term development of the country.
All right, absolutely. Sam, Nzefe has raised an important point about skills. Let's take a look at the Uwezo Fund. The uptake of that hasn't been as high as expected by the government. A lot of young people still struggling to put together a business plan. 30% of the tenders are set aside for the youth. Do we have enough skills where young people even know how to put together a tender, how to engage with government? You know, just talk to us about the skill set, particularly because you are right at the heart of it, dealing with young people. Is this a challenge?
Well, I have to completely agree with her on that one. And I think one of the things I've noticed is the fact that our education system needs either to change or to be improved on. Skills are lacking, even when it comes to entrepreneurship. When you bring these people from the university, they can barely do anything as far as business is concerned. So it's a really, really big challenge. So NILAB is forced to play, again, the role of a university, post-university sort of training, where we provide a sort of a three-month MBA program. So I'd probably suggest strongly that we need to start looking at our education system and preparing these people from an early age. They need to start innovating and learning how to innovate from the first year in university, not from the time they're done with university. So that's the other problem. That's why you notice that even when the resources and when we have got available plans like the Uwezo Fund, the Women Fund, the Enterprise Kenya Fund that's coming up right now, there's very little uptake. And even when after the few that get access to that don't do anything useful with it that we can actually see. So we cannot say necessarily, like right now, say 5,000 jobs have been created from the Uwezo Fund. We either don't have the data or it doesn't exist. And so there's a lot of need for that. And I think the presidential there's a presidential internship program that has come into play, and I think it might just solve part of that problem by attaching these interns to corporates like 7Cs, like NILAB, like these other companies. And I think from there maybe we might see some improvement, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. I think this is a serious problem with our education system.
Right, okay. I would like us to talk about some of the things that if we take a wider look at the Kenyan economy, and hopefully with this trip, we're hoping to look at foreign direct investment and say, come to Kenya, because that's what we're saying. Come here. But we do have challenges, Prof, with corruption. And Sam will tell you, startup capital is difficult. Most companies, in fact, Prof, put corruption in their cost of doing business. So what happens to this young person who doesn't have the capex to begin with, and then now has to factor in a kickback here or there? What, in your view, are the challenges that would actually make this whole panacea seem?
Well, I think I agree with you. I think issue of corruption, I think it's a fact that we have to deal with. And I think the question is not the problem itself. It's how we go ahead and solving these problems.
Do you think we're dealing with it in a way that gives confidence?
Truly, I think conceptually, I think in my opinion, what we have not done is to unpack this corruption. What we have really assumed is that the impact of corruption is homogeneous rather than heterogeneous. In the sense, what I mean by that is that the economic impact of particularly issue of capital flight, someone taking money out of the country, vis-a-vis giving a policeman 1,000 shillings to avoid traffic violations. The impact of those two scenarios are very, very different. And if you have to fight it, obviously there's constraint about the cost. The political cost, the economic cost have to be involved, and conceptually, corruption is a criminal action that that is provided within our legal system and need to be resolved. If someone chooses to engage in a corrupt deal, what they do is they calculate, or they do what cost-benefit analysis. The gain they're getting has to be greater than the probability of being apprehended, yes, as well as the cost of being punished.
Right.
And I think we have to give the president a lot of praise, in the sense that he has maybe increased these policy instrument of apprehension. Because once you increase it, then you make it very, very expensive for someone to engage in.
Okay, all right. Do you think Kenya is ready, Prof, for what's coming our way? Do you think we have talked about agreements like AGOA, for example, which we know wasn't as successful as we'd have liked in terms of the balance of trade and what we were sending out, and whether the quality, the standards of the goods that we were exporting met that? And we're going to be talking about that. In fact, the two presidents are going to be having bilateral talks. Are we ready for that in terms of the agreements that we're going to sign?
I think I think the jury is out on this one. I think to me is that I think what is so puzzling is that you have these bullishness that's coming from international market about where we're going as a country, but that bullishness is met with a lot of cynicism in locally. It's almost like we don't seem to understand that. So
you think we don't believe in ourselves enough?
To some extent, I think again, you cited some of the statistic, the economic growth that we're experiencing, but what you hear locally is something very, very different. Now, in terms of whether we are prepared or not, I think again we have to really, in my opinion, negotiate some of the decisions very, very strategically, because what have happened is that if you go back in the beginning of 1800, when Europe, what you call the Berlin Conference, Europe got together and they subjugated Africa. It's the same intensity that seems to really, coming through in the second round. The good thing, and I think this is where maybe our generation have to really play a part, is whether we are really prepared. Because as my colleague rightly stated, the reason Obama is coming here is not altruistic; it's driven by economic interest.
Okay.
And that is also manifests itself in China coming in, other countries really coming in. And I think the issue is whether our generation are really prepared to negotiate in such a way that we'll be able to solve our problems.
Okay.
That one I think is still out.
Okay, and that's what do we need to be doing? What are the negotiations that we need to have? Sam Gishuru will be there, and we'll talk to him about what he's going to be speaking about.
Yeah.
But what is that we need to do?
I think there are a couple of things that we need to be very strategic about. One is really looking for long-term patient capital. We need to prefer and select investors that are in for the long term. We don't want hot money that's going to be in and out and cause economic instability. So I think we need to be very clear on that. I think another thing is sort of leverage impact investment and social entrepreneurship funds. I think they are also by nature more patient, and they're more development oriented anyway, and they do have a mission built into the financing.
Right.
So I think if we can look into social entrepreneurship as well, and I think something else we need to be aware of is that if we can get people to build and bolster our manufacturing sector, I think it's very important. Right now, if you look at the export profile that we have to the US, it is mainly raw materials and assembly through AGOA. What we need to do is really build a manufacturing base so that we sophisticate our exports, value addition, and we get more money in the end for what we're making. So I think if we can look at those three things, long-term capital, social entrepreneurship, build the manufacturing sector, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
All right, Sam, so you have these entrepreneurs who whose businesses don't have a big history, and you're meeting some of the big tycoons, some of the big businessmen, and you know, obviously they're going to put in the money, and taking a look at the history of this tiny little company, this startup, and of course they're going to be pulling those strings. What's your advice to entrepreneurs who will be present at the summit in terms of getting the best deals? Because it's also easy for them to go, you know, I've met Richard Branson, I've met one of the sharks, I've met, you know, Strive Masiyiwa, or whoever else will be there, but just leveraging and getting this right, because this is it. This won't come again.
Well, one of the things I have to say I've learned this week is that this is not actually a government-to-government conversation. I don't think a lot of bilateral agreements will come out of this. One or two will, but I've learned this week that this is an entrepreneur-investor meeting. Because I was wondering whether we'll be able to raise a bit more money to have Konza accelerated, to have our Galana irrigations done, to have all LAPSET, you know, all these projects. But I was actually made to understand that this is about entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs. So the young entrepreneurs in this country will be meeting entrepreneurs from the US who are the global ambassadors for Obama. And what I could tell them is that these relationships don't just happen. They will not just happen on the platform. These relationships have to be built. And for them to be able to negotiate with the investors very well, to understand what she's just talked about, vulture capital, make sure you avoid that, make sure you look for patient capital, make sure you look for capital that is aligned towards what you're doing. The investor actually understands your kind of business, has invested in that kind of business in the past. You look for an investor with a track record. As much as the investor is doing due diligence on you, do some due diligence on the investor as well.
Okay.
Some of the problems we've experienced is what again she mentioned, that some investors came in a bit too early in this market a couple of years ago. They exited as well with a really bad taste of what the market was like. But they were looking for opportunities. I mean, these people are not coming here because they love us so much. Let's agree to that. They are looking for ways to increase their portfolios. Okay, it's up to us as well to be able to understand how can we take advantage of that particular presence and make sure that we also take care of our own interests.
What will happen to the entrepreneurs who won't be able to be at the summit? Are we looking at a trickle-down effect for someone who will not be there? How does this benefit that entrepreneur who will be essentially on the sidelines of this whole summit?
Well, one of the things is that the event will be live-streamed. And of course the programs will be shared. I mean, I'm sure it will be on social media. The best thing I would do if I was not an entrepreneur in the summit is follow the conversation. Follow who came for this summit. What were they looking for? What kind of interest do they have? In the last couple of months, I've been traveling around the world looking for investors to come and invest in the NILAB setup, and I've discovered people interested in energy, in renewable energy especially. It's a big interest. Agriculture is a big interest. You know, food security has been a big concern for a lot of people, and so water and sanitation as well. So be able to find out what these investors are interested in, and if you have passion towards that conversation, join it. So you don't have to be there with the investor. You can actually create a relationship from a remote location with these investors. My panel conversation is about specialty hubs and incubation labs. And I hope to drive a bigger conversation towards making sure we invest in marine tech type of hubs and incubation hub, or agri-tech or fintech, and cover places like Mombasa, Rift Valley, you know, cover places like Northeastern in terms of pastoralist. Can we build hubs and labs there for people who are interested in, you know, issues to do with pastoralism, you know, cow hide, I mean, horns, hooves, you know, and what those kind of things can be used for.
Value addition to a lot of our raw materials that Anzetse had talked about. But what's the environment like for a startup in Kenya? Because it is widely believed that we favor multinationals at the expense of our own startups and our own businesses. Prof, perhaps you can talk about that, what the environment is like for an entrepreneur in this country.
Obviously, I think we had a conversation with Sam earlier on before the show start, and I think one of the major problems is lack of awareness. You come with a new idea, the first thing you do is, first of all, to ensure that you protect that idea. So the issue of intellectual property becomes very, very central. And what happened initially in our country, that does happen, quite often. But again, going back to what Sam is saying, the reason why these multinational guys are coming is that we have resources, we have the opportunity, but we don't have the capital. So we have to deal with them in one or another. And so one other source I think is also very important is also making sure that we tap our own capital domestically. In fact, one of the there's a conference in Addis which was again this idea of trying to raise domestic mobilization, which is so central.
Right.
And my point is we have a lot of capital in our show that is not harnessed or unleashed. A case in point is you have Thika Superhighway that was constructed.
Yes.
When this idea was being conceived, nobody had foreseen the amount of capital that will be unleashed along that corridor. So we can have some kind of a commercial project that can start this capital, which is already in our own country, but is held in what we call dead capital.
All right, okay. I know what you're referring to, but then there's also the issue about how we utilize the funds that we have in the country. And I think we talked about this a little earlier with my colleague John Allen Namu about how we utilize our funds in the country. I mean, take a look at our national budget. How much of the money that we set aside for various functions in the different ministries goes back to Treasury at the end of the year? And here we are again with our begging bowls out saying, we need more money.
I mean, I think we have a fundamental problem in terms of how we structure our spending in this country. If you look at government spending in 2013-14, over 78% of that went to recurrent expenditure, right? If you look at 2014-15, we're due to spend over 60% on recurrent. Now this budget, we're trying to get our recurrent down to 50%. So we're having a really big problem in terms of even the debt that we're accruing as a country. A lot of that is going into recurrent. Now, of the money that goes into development funding, which is sort of the problems that we've been talking about in terms of our absorptive capacity, we're not even absorbing the money that we have left over for development. We're not absorbing it sufficiently. So I think we really need to look at the spending habits, and this is why I'm saying that we need to do structural work before we go hunting for money. Kenya and Africa is really into hunting for money because we think money is a solution to our problems. But if you look at the way we're spending and structuring our spending, what we need to do is, one, build up our skill sets. Number two, figure out why we're not absorbing the money. What are the technical skills gaps? What is the issue behind that lack of absorption? So that when we do attract the capital, we don't frustrate the investors. Because we're in a very dangerous position. We're telling guys to come and invest, but are we going to be able to absorb and deliver? Are we going to be able to deliver on the promises that we're making, on the returns that we say we're going to make? So I think we do need to do some homework, figure out why we're not absorbing money properly, cut down on our recurrent expenditure, so that when the investors come in, we are ready for them, we can deliver those returns, and we can build our economy.
All right, and still talking about entrepreneurship, and Sam, this question I think should have gone to you in the first place. The environment for an entrepreneur in this country, you're sitting there at NILAB and all of these people are coming there, and you're providing this space for them to do so. So you're creative, you're innovative, you've come up with something. What then? Do you find a hostile situation when you go out there trying to get simple things like patents even?
Okay, let's start from the fact that, one, we only have like a small handful of incubators in the country. NILAB has a contract with the Kenyan government, but incubators are heavily government subsidized. Now, I didn't hear any budget going towards innovation deficit in this country this year, and that is a bit of a problem. Estonia has got 60 billion, I think, if I'm not wrong, on innovation, and they have a population of 1.3 million people. We have a 40 million population, and this amount of money we put on innovation was what, 1 billion that was announced by the president just recently. And so basically, first, that's a serious problem. When NILAB's contract with the government runs out, what next? We don't have another incubation hub that's heavily subsidized by government. So where will the innovators go? Now, normally we have over 100 applicants, and we can only pick 6 every 6 months. So we can only pick 12 every year. And so we are looking at hundreds of innovators looking for a place to go and work from. And so that's one of the biggest problems, and we have 90 plus remaining out there not knowing what to do. Two, corporates don't seem to really be committed towards mentoring, co-creation, incremental innovations. That is our second challenge. Corporates seem to be very afraid of buying local as well. So even if you're building solutions and they're not being bought locally, what does that mean? If government itself is not acquiring local solutions to use, does that say that they're very confident about the local innovation ecosystem? And so, of course, that goes to the problem that Prof mentioned again. So, who is going to invest in this country if we are not buying the same products ourselves? You know, and so if we start buying those products, if we talk to an investor and say, well, I have a deal with the Ministry of Education for this particular X product, then the investor suddenly has a lot of confidence that he's going to get a times 10 return on investment, because he can almost see how much has been put in the education budget. So we've been having so many challenges as we grow, and NILAB is about 4 years old right now, but you can also see, okay, these are the gaps that we have, this is how to solve these gaps, and of course government is a really big player. And so we hope for a lot more engagement.
Right, government is big business, and I know you work closely with government, but accessing government services, accessing government tenders, for example, how simple has that been for some of the entrepreneurs you've worked with in terms of just getting this 30% of the tenders that are out there?
Wow, I could probably say 0.001% of the entrepreneurs have had access to a government tender. So it's not how simple it is, it's how complex. I think we'd rather talk about how complex is it, from gatekeepers in government who will, completely make sure you don't meet the right people to have the right conversations, from people who are trying to be corrupt right here in government, who will always ask for, a bribe. I mean, you're asking a young entrepreneur to pay $1 million shillings to get a contract, and we have a zero bribe policy for all the startups we work with. You're talking about tenders that have already been dished out before they're advertised. So you're having an entrepreneur spend 2 to 3 weeks preparing documents that will never see the light of day. So I have to say that government as a big player has a lot of work to do in terms of changing policy, in terms of talking to us, explaining to us, teaching us their processes and systems. This 21, 22, 23 year olds also don't understand the processes of procurement in government, and they're pretty complex. Yeah. I mean, even I have a problem with them myself, and I've been in business over 10 years.
Right.
So I'd say that, well, government has done a lot. I mean, from working with ICT Authority, they were very open to working with entrepreneurs. They put entrepreneurs on very good platforms. The current CEO, Victor, has actually extended we were at the Connected Government, gave us a platform to talk to investors. Konza is very open. The current CEO, Tanui, is also very open to having conversations. That's very, very brilliant, that young CEOs are coming into government, parastatals, and calling us and say, come for a meeting. These are the opportunity for entrepreneurs. Let's work on them. The president promising the $1 billion shillings for Enterprise Kenya, very good, very beautiful, but we need a lot more. That's a very small, change. We need a lot more to actually have impact.
Okay, and that's how should the government change its interactions with young people, with startups, and its approach to entrepreneurship? Yes, they've already done quite a bit, but how much more if you consider that opening a business in Rwanda takes hours, and here it's a long step process, and even as we continue to say that Kenya is an economic powerhouse, Rwanda is coming up, and so is Ethiopia, really fast.
I think for me it has to get down to skill sets. That's, for me, is the fundamental issue. And I think here I have a concern with government changing our post-secondary, some of our post-secondary institutions into universities. I think vocational schools and technical schools have a crucial role to play in building the skill sets of young people, and I think that is something that government should be more aggressive in encouraging young people to do that, and not think that you have to go to university, get a degree in business, and then start a business, but that you can do these practical, technical skills that can build you up. I think another thing government needs to do, I think, is be a bit more aggressive in attracting impact investing funds. I think there is a big trend right now in the world around social entrepreneurship, impact investment, and I think that is a sort of capital that we'd be able to, first of all, experiment, do our pilots, make our mistakes. That capital demands less returns generally. The most, you're looking at the triple bottom line of financial, social, and environmental return. So there is a lot more understanding around, you may not make the financial returns, but if your social impact is great, that makes sense for them as well. So I think we need to start looking into different types of finance that are out there, the types of finance that would work for Kenya where we are right now, and the types of finance that will allow the youth to experiment and figure out how it really works. Because as what Sam has been saying is that we're learning as we go along. We don't have the formulas. We don't have these ancient economies that have figured it out. So I think we do need to attract the capital that allows that experimentation to happen with the ultimate objective, obviously, of getting the returns back in the long term.
Okay, Prof, as we have our closing comments now, I'd like you to comment on two issues, if you can. What Kenya needs to do to make sure that she stays at the top and is the economic powerhouse of the region. Like we've talked about, there's the other countries that are coming up, and just what we need to fix to make sure that we stay on top, and also what we need to do to make sure that this is shared out to everybody, because then it starts to become that it's only a certain group of people. We talk about Africa rising, but for whom? Today we're hearing Kenya has $8,700 millionaires out of the millions in the world, but just how to be able to now share the spoils out to everybody.
Good. I think you asked a very fundamental question, which I think it's actually ties to the question you are raising between what Rwanda is doing and Ethiopia is doing. What's very unique about Kenya, and I think I want to highlight, because I think it's one of the major distinguishing characteristics of our country, is that there are two principles that drive economic development. You have the issue of equity vis-a-vis efficiency. Equity is about how dividing the cake. Once we make this cake, then we divide who's going to get what. That is determined by the political power. On the other hand, efficiency is about baking this cake, which is driven by economic forces in the market. What we have done is that we are able to really, on one hand, our economy has been driven by market institutions. Politically, through our new constitution, we're able to relay, for some reason, and I think maybe democracy looks to be a market, it looks dirty, but somehow we're making some tangible benefit.
Okay.
And to me, that's actually really attracting foreign direct investment. Rwanda and Ethiopia have chosen to take economic route, and they're doing very well. But at one time, they have to come and deal with these political issues in terms of how these how you subdivide this cake. Now, in terms of how what we should do in order to remain on the top, I think we should continue this development strategy that we have started of cost reduction. We have the issue of standard gauge railway that is reducing the transportation cost. There's also this initiative that we are reducing the energy cost, which again going to this idea of reducing the cost of doing business. Once you reduce cost of business, we increase competitiveness, and thus attract our investment. Very quickly, and I think this is an issue that I think you addressed to Sam, and I think my colleague here. Government, the role of the government, sometimes you assume is something out there. The way someone is putting it is the government need to do this, need to do this. But you ask is, who is the government? It is you and I. And unless you've asked the government to do the certain things that you want to do, most chances they will not get it. So it's up to the young people, especially the entrepreneur, get themselves organized and start demanding for these policies that are really more favorable to them. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you have the multinational coming in. They also have equally,
the big money and
big money, and they can also influence how the things will go. So, in a nutshell, I think we need to continue the development strategy that we have taken, reducing the cost of doing business.
Okay, all right. Sam, then we'll finish with you, Anzetse. Sam, your hopes for this, what you're going to be speaking about, and just again, remind us why entrepreneurship is the big thing and how to make the most of it.
I think number one is, my hopes for this is that I think we need to behave better. The world will be watching us. This event will be live streamed from the White House, from the GS, and from the President Obama's website. Will be live streamed globally. All the media will be watching. I think as a country we need to behave better for us to be able to gain some soft power that places us as a place where people can come to visit after this event for tourism, for business. That's extremely important for us right now. I mean, anything we do that could end up messing that kind of reputation, I think we should stay away from. Okay. My conversation, my panelist is a very high-powered panel that is going to be discussing specialty incubators and accelerators. And as I was saying earlier, I hope that after this particular conference, the government can see the need to expand what we do. We're already talking to county governments to see how can we set up incubators in different counties to stimulate entrepreneurship and stimulate innovation in those counties, hoping that the counties themselves will go to the incubators to get the solutions they are seeking for some of their challenges. But I'm hoping that at the end result of that incubator conversation, we will have incubators that range from restaurant incubators, dual-kali incubators, agri-tech incubators, marine incubators. Even we are bordering very Somali and Sudan here, and we need even defense security type of incubators to
Right.
build security solutions locally
Right.
instead of importing all these things.
Why not?
Of course, I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring more corporates to do their corporate social investment within the same region.
Okay.
Well, I insist, I say that entrepreneurship gives us an opportunity to create more jobs, and I like what she said a bit earlier. We really need to have laid a very good foundation for this to actually happen.
Okay.
For me, I'm looking forward to as a place where we create more jobs, reduce insecurity because of the extremism is happening because of lack of hope, and people with jobs will not be going to Somali for extremists to sign up for the extremist
Okay.
activity. So
All right.
that's
Great
my
stuff.
yeah.
And that's it. Final comments?
I think we just need to, as I'm saying, understand the different players that have to participate in this conversation. I think one player is government, and as these people have said, I think their role is really to create an enabling environment that makes investment attractive. I think the other role that needs to play their role is the private sector. I think being a bit more creative, flexible in the way they approach economic growth and development and in terms of their investment strategies. And I think ultimately that the Kenyan citizen, we need to become a bit more analytical in terms of put pressure on government and have our lists and our demands, so that when Obama comes to Kenya, there's a very clear sense of Kenyans want this, these are our demands, and this is how we want to leverage, this interaction. So I think we just need to continue to have conversations and get more confidence and a bit more specific in terms of what we want when these big conferences come. What are the specific things that we're looking for?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Sam Gishuru, Nailab, Professor Joseph Kia from Kipra, and Anzetse Were, development economist and columnist at the Business Daily. We will continue with our focus on the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. So please do stay with us, and we'll be getting to your views in just a moment. But John Alanama has been following the conversation tonight and wraps it up. And what's the point?
Very interesting insights coming out of that discussion. Very, very insightful indeed. Now, there are a couple of points, of course, that you'll be taking home. Here are some that I noted down during that discussion. The first one is that whereas the Global Entrepreneurship Summit is coming to Kenya, and we're going to be discussing entrepreneurship globally, there still are some local challenges, specifically within the youth as a subset and focus for entrepreneurship. And that is the challenges that they're facing with respect to accessing capital, accessing government. Those lacks of linkages are still a serious challenge, and it will be important not just for the government but for the youth themselves to be able to study up, to be able to find people who can inform them on how to be able to access government, how to be able to write a proposal, a business proposal that'll get you into the room with that entrepreneur that you're looking to get some deals from. Now, secondly, the cost of doing business cannot be talked about enough in this country with respect to the things that are making it more expensive to do business in Kenya, and also to an extent within the region, corruption being one of them. That a business person would have to figure in corruption, figure in monies for corruption as a cost, as an actual cost to doing that business. It makes other investors who are coming into this country a bit unwilling to engage with the current setup, with the current scenario in this country. We need to be able to resolve these issues in order for us to become even more attractive. As Yvonne had mentioned, there are a lot of things that are very attractive about this country, but to become even more attractive, the business environment must be one that abhors corruption to the greatest extent. Finally, the devil is indeed in the details with respect to what's going to be happening in this coming week and in the weeks to follow, with investors coming from around the world and staking their interest in Kenya. None of it is altruistic. All of them have an interest in being able to benefit and get the greatest benefit that they can for their businesses and for themselves once they invest in an idea, once they invest in a business in this country. So as entrepreneurs, as government, we need to be extremely clear with what it is that we want and be strategic about the kind of money that we want from them, the kind of investment that we want from investors coming from around the world. That way we'll be able to plan long term and secure the fundamentals for businesses, for entrepreneurship, and indeed for government and investment in this country for a long time to come. And that this evening is a point. All right. right, great interview. Of course, keep your feedback coming in on Checkpoint this evening. The hashtag is indeed Checkpoint. We'll be reading some of your feedback in a few short moments. Let's just take a short break now, and we'll be back on KTN Weekend Prime, the Points of News.
Alright, so let's look at your feedback regarding our discussion tonight on Checkpoint. Dingi Masuku, you say, as an outsider, I have seen lots of knowledge in Kenyan entrepreneurs which Africa can benefit from. Another one here from Fibonacci at SK_Njoroge, you say, the GES sets the stage is set. This will be groundbreaking, pushing local entrepreneurs to new levels.
The Truth by NK, Nahashon 87, at Nahashon 87, is just speaking about that knowledge-based economy. Cost reduction is nice, but a greater emphasis on a knowledge-based economy is necessary. Remember, knowledge can help reduce costs. And right below him, Jay Marcella says, entrepreneurship and innovation are inseparable. K Global Innovation Index input is negative. What do you expect of its output?
There you go.
Yeah.
Deborah Kwanga, thank you for tweeting in. You say it's important to develop the employability of young professionals in the country.
And no, this one, this Fibonacci, I think you've read already. Impact Hub Nairobi says, Industry KE should work closely with innovators and entrepreneurs to create necessary policies to help Kenyan innovators. And I think that's something that you discussed, Yvonne, in this panel, with respect to there being loads of innovation, loads of great ideas, and in fact the knowledge being there. But there's a bit of a gap in terms of, number one, legislation, and number two, the willingness of government, especially as an agent in being able to spur on this innovation, to engage and make people, you know, the greatest versions of themselves. I think Sam mentioned that in terms of taxation on
Yes, and that's where I also talked about the private sector also stepping up to the plate. And I think that's important. We have some big private businesses who could do with a lot of the innovation that's coming up. And remember, it's not just in terms of apps and that sort of thing. There's lots of innovators in simple things like farming and agriculture. And so there's lots to talk about and to think about, especially as we go forward with this one. So keep your views coming in. We'll continue to sample them. 22155 at Yvonne Okwara, at John Alanamo, and at KTN News KE, as we continue to discuss the Global Entrepreneurship Summit and what it has in store for Kenyans, and not just entrepreneurs, but you know, what are the benefits for you even if you are not one. I keep saying I'm not an entrepreneur, so I want to know how this benefits me as well. So we'll get to that in just a minute, but John will be back.
So the sports news, back in a moment.
So, is this glass half full or half empty? That all depends on your perspective. Of course, you could look at things differently. For instance, you could ask, who was drinking from this glass? Or the quality of the water in the glass. It could speak to those things that occur over time. And of course, the glass itself could tell you a story. There's different ways to look at stories too. It all depends on your perspective.
You can also watch this show on DSTV channel 274, GoTV on channel 94, and Zuku on channel 14.
Uweza Soccer Academy are the winners of the 13th edition of the annual Ramadan Cup tournament after they closely edged out last year's champions Gogo Boys. The tournament was instrumental in that it brought players across the religious divide together for a common goal.
Uweza Soccer Academy are the winners of the 13th edition of the annual Ramadan Cup tournament after they closely edged out last year's champion Gogo Boys 1-0 in the final match played on Saturday at Joseph Kangeme Woodley Grounds in Nairobi. Midfielder Eric Sako slotted in a 16th minute penalty past Gogo custodian Ezekiel Kombo after the skipper Hamis Buda was brought down by defender Adam Hamisi in the box.
It is real grassroots football. This is what football is about. If you look around, guys are seated and enjoying themselves on a good sunny afternoon. This is what football should be about.
En route to the final, Gogo beat Makina Youth 1-0, courtesy of Yasin Bitter's goal, while Uweza had bundled out young boys with Ali Hassan's goal in the 70th minute.
Even those of us who are Muslims can understand that we are part of the game and they are part of the game. And we must work together. It's a show of unity and a show of working together.
It will, however, not be an easy task for Uweza Soccer Academy as they look to defend their title next year.
Alright, enough with soccer for now. Let's move to a sport that he said is played in heaven, rugby. Kenya Rugby 15-a-side national team has seen its fortunes rise this year after a series of impressive results over better-ranked teams the world over. Kenya has flourished in test matches this year, losing only once to Zimbabwe in the Rugby Afrique Division 1A Championship. Could this be the year for Simba?
2015 has seen the Kenya 15-a-side national team take part in the series of matches which have seen Simba flourish in the international scenes to the envy of their opponents. Simba's first outing this year was against Portugal, a side ranked 3 places above Kenya in international rugby. Kenya proved critics wrong as they disposed the European side 41-25 to go to an all-time high 29 in the world rankings. Previously, Kenya rose to 30 in the world in 2013 after powering past Uganda in Rugby Afrique Group 1A. In their second outing, Kenya suffered a setback, losing to Zimbabwe in their first match in Rugby Afrique Division 1A, a match which saw Simba drop down 1 place in rankings from 29th to 30th. This, however, did not deter Kenya as they regrouped to hit Tunisia with a resounding 46-15 win in Nairobi. This prompted Kenya to go for better opponents in Spain. The match from the start seemed balanced, but Lawrence Buyachi try in the dying minutes of the match saw Kenya take the honours. With the win set to see Kenya go up in the world rankings, could this finally be the year of the Simba?
The coach has a plan. He has depth of talent from, he has an under-19 team, and there's a Kenya A, I think, and a Simba. So he has he has a system, in short. He has depth of players. And I think with that sort of plan is what Kenya actually needs.
I think the team currently we have as constituted can actually do much more, yeah. And with exposure to more international games like this, you know, as we meet the sides, I think we can build a better squad.
Despite losing the Elgon Title Cup to Uganda this year, a majority of rugby fans feel the 15th team is finally coming out of the shadows of its 7th sister.
It's been sad that the 7th team has always been in the lights instead of the 15th team, but I think this is actually the year when they're actually going to step up and get out of it.
If the 15th team continue with its upward trend, then Kenya will be moving to a higher height.
What makes you think that England cannot come here and we beat them? What makes you that New Zealand cannot come here and we beat them? If you believe God can make it possible. And today, God and hard work and dedication from everybody has told you that, listen, the Kenyan boys are up to it.
After turning up their performances, all eyes will be out to see how Kenya performs. Robinson Okenye, KTN.
Let's wind up with some golf news now, and Jimmy Kingori posted 39 Stableford points to emerge the overall winner of the 6th edition of the ongoing Standard County Golf Classic Championship, played at the Par 71 Nyali Golf Club and Country Club course in Mombasa County. Despite dropping 4 mixed bogey shots in both nines, Kingori, a handicap 10, rolled a total of 12 level pars and sank a rare birdie on the shortest par 3 15th hole to put him in the lead. Standard Media Group sponsored the day-long tournament that attracted 150 golfers with a valid handicap from the home club, Mombasa, Leisure, Vipingo and Malindi. William Botte, playing off handicap 17, was a men's winner on 37 points, while handicap 27 Suresh Hirani was a runner-up with 36 points, and taking the third slot was handicap 14 Aaron Kivuvi, who was 1 point behind. Standard Group's photojournalist Sam Mose from the groups was from Nyeri was the group's winner.
And we are very glad that we are partnering with Nyali this year. And I can assure you that next year we'll be here again in a better and bigger way.
Alright, so more of your feedback. Rosemary Amondi says, my expectation for the GE Summit is that the lessons and effort to support and engage entrepreneurs will remain after the summit. I think we can all echo that one. And then there was another good one here. Let me see if I can find it.
Here's some tongue-in-cheek comment here. Well, it's actually not tongue-in-cheek, it's fairly direct. Paul Murigo says, we need entrepreneurs who create world-class products, not tenderpreneurs who rely heavily on corruption.
Okay.
So it's a fair point.
Yeah, absolutely. Half Poet at Jackson Jaxo, you say, the GES won't make any sense if all the government of Kenya has done is getting loans with no infrastructural development seen. So that and more of your feedback. I mean, there's lots more. Definitely.
Yeah, I think I'll just take one last one. Ann Lawi says GS 2015 can give Kenya soft power to stimulate immediate impact for economic growth.
Let me read one last one. Nutri Fresh Farm and Agricultural Hub. You say a 1% rise in agricultural per capita GDP reduces the poverty gap 5 times more than a 1% rise in other economic sectors. Now, I've also seen a couple of tweets saying, oh, you know, all this entrepreneurship talk is posh. But then again, innovation doesn't have to be an app and all this techie stuff. And I'll admit it because I'm not a techie buff at all. But I've seen a couple of people doing some interesting businesses with providing you with your vegetables for the week because you have a busy lifestyle and you don't have enough time to shop. So someone says, what do you need? I'll go to the market, I'll get you your skuma wikis, your hohos, that sort of thing. I'll put them together and I'll deliver them to your doorstep at whatever time you want. So innovation can be from the fairly simple and granular all the way up until, you know, the guys building the drones and that sort of thing.
And you know, I get the point that the language sometimes can obstruct people from seeing the point, and you're so right. Innovation is really just about solving a problem. So if you can solve a problem, if you're able to, through your business, through your ideas, solve a problem for a lot of people, that's innovative. It doesn't have to be, you know, technical. It doesn't have to be that. Some of the best ideas
are fairly simple.
And they're just problem solvers. So and we're great at solving problems.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. Yes. Thank you for your feedback. Quick one. So, what's heaven like?
Oh, you see, I
you
haven't got
say rugby is the game that is played in heaven.
Look, it is
just because you play rugby.
No. It's a calculated assumption on how happy the people who have been left by rugby players are, and having been visited anyway. You'd have to be a rugby player to understand.
Assumption.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, just thought I'd put that one in. Hey, okay, you plugged in for that one just because you play golf. I mean, you play rugby.
Hey.
Yeah. No, I'm a golf player.
Oh, really?
Not really. I'm not going to lie on national television.
The has just widened between us.
All right, anyway, we'll leave it at that for now. Please do stay tuned to KTN News for our comprehensive coverage on the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Beyond the fluff, beyond the hype, we will be getting down to that one. And we promise you, by the time we're done, you will start to understand that this is not a posh sort of out there topic. It's got benefits for us all. in this country. Thanks for your feedback and for watching tonight. As we like to say here on The Point of News, good night, East Africa. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole.
My name is John Allen Namu. Have a great week ahead.